master wife, fall in his slave love. They said the summer light in Tennessee could make a lie look honest. It poured over the white columns and the clipped lawns and the long, disciplined rows of cotton until everything shone with a noble deceit. From the window of her bedroom, Elizabeth Caldwell watched that light roll across 500 acres and felt none of its warmth. The house, Willow Creek, had been built to awe. 4 proud pillars, a sweep of veranda, imported chairs that punished the spine, silver that never dulled. It was not a home. It was a polished verdict. 3 years had taught her the terms of it. Philadelphia left behind, debts paid with a signature and a womb, a husband whose affection never touched the skin. Jonathan read ledgers while he ate and corrected the world with numbers. He announced his departure for Nashville as if leaving a room he disliked. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. Choose a new house servant. Old Joseph is dead. He did not look up when he said it. Elizabeth measured her reply into the space he allowed. She managed things. She did her duty. His mouth tightened at the word duty, as though a taste had gone sour. The wagon arrived by noon. A dozen souls stepped down in irons that had already learned their ankles. Overseer Williams stood with his whip at rest like a pipe at a colonel's mouth, ornament and promise. He spoke of skills, a woman who could cook, a girl good with floors, a man who could read and write a bit. That last detail caught and held. The man was tall, fatigue sanded down to a sheen of dignity. He met her eyes when she asked his name. Isaiah, ma'am. You learned your letters? Yes. A former mistress from Boston. Then stolen hours. Stolen pages.
A life told in sales. Virginia to South Carolina to Georgia to here.
She chose him for the library because she needed help with the cataloging and because a part of her, newly awake to danger, wanted to say the word. Because to herself, and not finish the sentence. The first real conversation happened among books. He brought a tray and the quiet that belonged to men who had been trained to make no sound. When their eyes met, the room adjusted. Shelves, lamp, the afternoon itself drew back a step. He knew Shakespeare. He had read Othello and understood its bitter geometry. She offered Wordsworth and snatched the volume back as if it burned. Her mind ran ahead to consequences and the mindless brutality that enforced them. He said simply that Mr. Caldwell was away. It was not an invitation. It was a fact that opened a door in the air. They worked side by side, rearranging thought into order. He handled each book as if the object deserved its own breath. Their fingers touched, and the small clatter of a dropped binding sounded much louder than it should. He asked about Philadelphia, and she told him of streets that smelled of bread and ink, of women who walked unescorted, of free black families moving like weather through the city, unremarkable and whole. He recited his map of bondage without complaint. She said, "I'm sorry," and meant the entire republic. By the 3rd day, the library had become a country with its own borders. She learned the shape of his silences. He learned when her gaze wanted a window and when it wanted him. Dusk made accomplices of them. On the veranda, with cicadas sawing at the dark, he spoke her name once, so soft it could have been the wind negotiating the oaks. Something long numbed inside her woke and sat upright. She touched his hand and knew, with the shock clarity of lightning, that the line they had not crossed was only chalk on wet stone. The storm came like an alibi, rain marching hard across the fields, sky torn by white fire. The house shuddered and emptied as Williams took men to the west break. In the library, candles guttered and steadied. She asked him to read. He chose, "She was a phantom of delight," and the words changed ownership as he spoke them. When he looked up on the last stanza, he was no longer reading. He was remembering. The kiss was her decision and his answer. Reverence lives in strange places. It lived in the way he held her face as if it were an oath. Outside, thunder measured time. Inside, the world they had been assigned fell away. After, with her cheek against his chest and the storm's breath still at the panes, he asked what came next. She gave the honest lie all lovers tell. "We have this." He gave the truth that stood beside it. "They can take everything." "Love," she said, and the word did not tremble. He closed his eyes as if bracing for a blow, and when he opened them, he was beautiful with fear. "Loving you may be the death of me." It was not melodrama. It was an inventory. Night became their hour. The unused study in the east wing, a rain-lit gazebo at the garden's edge, the library after the house slept, each place won and defended like a hill. She saved dollars from household money, a rebellion of small thefts. He sought Whispers, a free man in Nashville who knew the first stations north, safe hands, false bottoms in wagons. They planned nothing grand, only a vanishing. 2 or 3 weeks, he said, to lay paths proper. Until then, they must be perfect strangers in the daylight, perfection phrase. Mary, who had buttoned Elizabeth's dresses since the wedding day, watched the bloom in her mistress's face with worry standing behind it. Williams watched Isaiah with the thin amusement cruelty wears. Charlotte Richardson watched everything, because that is what the respectable do when bored. Rumor is faster than a horse. It reached Jonathan before he reached home. He returned with the sound of wheels on gravel and a weather report for his marriage in his eyes. He noted the new servant, shaped his mouth around Isaiah's name as if testing its fit. Has he been satisfactory? The innocent word leaned at the edge of the table and waited to fall. Elizabeth's yes did not tremble. Dinner was a tedious speech about markets, but more than once she felt his gaze like a hand pressed to the throat. That night he came to her room with a marital right and a hunter's calm. "You've changed," he said, and touched her face with the care a man gives porcelain he intends to keep. She survived him with her mind elsewhere, in a small room full of books and breath. 3 weeks, she told herself. 3, and we are free. 5 days burned through like paper. Morning brought the breaking. On the veranda, with coffee and the beauty of a cruel landscape laid out in clean lines, Jonathan dismissed Isaiah to the fields. Elizabeth questioned him softly and paid for the softness with a narrowing of his eyes. When Isaiah had gone, Jonathan asked if she thought him a fool. She took the blame and begged him to spare the man. He smiled with a mouth that did not reach his eyes. "How noble," he said, and set out to correct the universe. She ran to Mary and put money in the older woman's hands and asked a favor no servant should be asked: save him. Mary's face held more history than the house. "What you two are is a sin by every man's law," she said. "But I've watched how he treats you. No woman deserves that." She did what she could. It was not enough. Isaiah was dragged back with wrists bound and a shirt that had forgotten its shape. Jonathan ordered the post, the assembly, the lesson. Elizabeth stood in front of the whip at 30 strokes and offered her own body as ledger entry. He locked her in her room and finished the arithmetic. Isaiah did not die. Jonathan promised Louisiana, which is sometimes the same thing. Dawn made a narrow mercy. Mary brought a key and news like a threadbare blanket. Alive, barely, in the tool shed, a traitor at noon. Elizabeth dressed for flight, riding breeches under a plain dress, hair braided tight, ring left on the vanity like an unclaimed debt. She broke the lock, found Isaiah, and raised him by will and force. "North," she said. "First we breathe, then we ride." She stole horses with a soft lie and a quick rope, and they fled along the tree line. The world behind them waking into pursuit. Rifle fire found the air around them, but not their bodies. In a ruined trapper's cabin, she washed blood from his back with water that stung and prayer that did not. Voices crept through the trees. He chose for them. They would split, he west to pull the hunt, she north where rivers turned into borders. She refused until he made refusal into a sin. "You'll last an hour," she said. "Long enough," he answered, and smiled like a man who had learned the cost of everything. They kissed like a promise and like a will. In the clearing, he began to sing, old words shape-shifting into a lure. "Swing low, sweet chariot." The sound carried, and the men who owned dogs followed the song. She rode into the hush between heartbeats with tears that did not ask permission. A shout, a shot, and then the awful quiet that sometimes means mercy and sometimes means the opposite. She did not look back. Love had made a coward of her once. Now it made her brave in the only way that mattered. Forward. Jonathan returned to a house that would never again feel complete. Williams could not explain how 2 horses leapt a fence and the night itself conspired. Mary's mouth stayed shut like a tomb. In town, certain men spoke soft words to certain other men about rumors with teeth. Elizabeth rode until the earth changed under the hooves and the air took on a northern edge. She hid by day and moved by starlight, and when she could not think of a prayer, she told herself stories. A small house, a table, ink on her fingers, Isaiah at the door. Sometimes she allowed the worst into her imagining. Louisiana. Sugar fields, a grave with no name, and then she would ride harder, as if speed itself were an argument against fate. Somewhere a judge would find a conscience. Somewhere a churchwoman would decide her gossip had gone far enough. Somewhere a conductor on a line without tracks would take a lamp and a risk. Somewhere a man would live because a bullet meant to kill chose a tree instead. The world is more complicated than the punishments it invents. Elizabeth put her faith in the small machinery of human mercy. The hidden door, the shared bread, the pointed finger that says this way. On the third night, under a sky so thick with stars it looked like a promise, she stopped by a creek and held her mother's miniature in her palm. "I will be the woman you raised," she told the painted face. The vow did not make her safer. It made her true. She slept in snatches and woke to the bird rattle of a world still busy with its own survival. When fear came, she named it and rode with it, not against it. Naming is a kind of power. Back at Willow Creek, the silver still shone and the ledgers still balanced. Men congratulated themselves on order restored. But something fundamental had slipped its bridle. A mistress had chosen love over law. A man who had been told he was an object had sung himself into legend. The fields would green again, and storms would come, and children would be born and sold, but the lie of the place no longer gleamed quite so clean in the Tennessee light. Elizabeth rode toward a border she could not see. Her body sore, her money thin, her heart an instrument tuned now to a single note, forward. She did not know if Isaiah lived. She did not know what a city of brick and abolition and winter might ask of her. She knew only this. The life she had been given was a sentence, and the life she reached for was a verb. She chose the verb. If love had cost her everything, then everything would be spent well. She pressed her heels to the horse and did not look back.